representing, I am representing Black History Month with a fact, an icon, hopefully one you've never heard of. And there'll be some factual information, and there'll certainly be information about my connection to this person. His name is Billy Strayhorn, and it goes like this. No doubt you've heard, wait, excuse me, I think I need glasses. No doubt you've heard of the world famous Duke Ellington and his orchestra, but did you know about his collaborator of almost 30 years, creating some of their most iconic tunes? In 2014, I was invited to perform a tribute to composer Billy Strayhorn with the Philadelphia Jazz Project in my hometown of Philadelphia. By then, I had already been featured on Broadway in the Duke Ellington musical Sophisticated Ladies, with Gregory Hines, Judith Jamison, Phyllis Hyman, and Mercedes Ellington, where we performed some of Mr. Strayhorn's music. It took me all these years to sit down and learn about him, though his music is now a part of my artistic education. That is why I am inspired by this short, black, gay genius of a man. Billy Strayhorn is an American jazz artist. For nearly 30 years, the small 5'3" diffident guy with the gold-rimmed spectacles, nicknamed Sweet Pea by the band members, after the iconic or the comic book character, served as Ellington's closest confidant and collaborator. He was born William Thomas Strayhorn on November 29th, 1915 in Dayton, Ohio, but he, along with his family, relocated to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His father was a known alcoholic, and to escape from his drunken abuse, Billy spent a considerable amount of his childhood in Hillsborough, North Carolina, in the care of his grandmother, who nurtured him with the beauty of music. During his elementary years, he shared that he worked a series of odd jobs to save money and buy his piano. Upon his return to Pittsburgh, he enrolled in Westinghouse School, where he began to study music formally. At 16, he was a member of the school's band and composed several song lyrics, of which one of these turned out to be the later hit Lush Life, which was originally titled Life is Lonely. He entered the world of jazz upon introduction to music produced by Art Tatum and Teddy Wilson at the age of 19, after his dream of entering the world of classical music was shot down due to his race. Billy first witnessed Duke Ellington's performance in Pittsburgh, 1933, but it wasn't until 5 years later, in 1938, that the two formally met. After the performance, Billy approached Ellington and shared his musical arrangements, which impressed the Duke, who took him on as a staff arranger despite his apparent lack of experience. Before long, he found himself in charge of almost all the arrangements for band vocalists, in particular the recent arrival of Ivy Anderson. Ellington regarded Strayhorn affectionately as his right arm, left arm, and the eyes and back of his head. Billy Strayhorn was the man behind the band's successful hits, such as Take the A Train, Lush Life, Rain Check, and the Chelsea Bridge, to name a few. Although much of his skill was overshadowed by Ellington, Duke made sure he gave him the proper credits to his work until his untimely death in 1967. Their work on the moody and mellow film score for Anatomy of a Murder, 1959, starring James Stewart and Lee Remick, is often regarded as one of their finest collaborative efforts. Strayhorn also played an instrumental role in writing the idiomatic and evocative soundtrack for Paris Blues, 1961, starring Paul Newman, Sidney Poitier, and Joanne Woodward. In his private life, Strayhorn was committed to social and charitable causes. He was the former president of the Copacetics, a Harlem-based fraternal organization for entertainers. He was a strong supporter of the civil rights movement and a personal friend of Martin Luther King. And in 1963, he conducted and arranged for the Ellington Orchestra the piece King Fit the Battle of Alabama. Though openly gay, Strayhorn maintained a particularly intimate relationship with singer and actress Lena Horne. He died from esophageal cancer on May 31st, 1967, in the presence of his partner, Bill Grove, in New York. So in my 2 years on Broadway in Sophisticated Ladies, I found myself In the wings, almost every night, when Gregory Hines would come on to sing the Strayhorn tune, Something to Live For. And the lyrics and Greg's performance captivated me. The lyrics go like this: I have almost everything a human could desire. Cars and houses, bearskin rugs to lie before my fire. But there's something missing. Something isn't there. It seems I'm never kissing the one whom I could care for. I want something to live for, something to make my life an adventurous dream. Oh, what wouldn't I give for someone to make my life, to take my life and make it seem gay as they say it ought to be. Why can't I have love like that brought to me? My eye is watching the noon crowds, searching the promenades, seeking a clue to the one who will someday be my something to live for. So Billy Strayhorn inspires me because his life was not about being black, nor being gay, nor 5'3", but I'm sure it informed his art. But he was about music and creativity. He allowed spirit to speak through him, to create beauty, to carry him all over the world and throughout time. That's been my endeavor and my life. And that is my presentation. Thank you. And now, the illustrious Reverend Joel.
Thank you, Ty. Wow, that was awesome. When I woke up this morning, I didn't think I'd be hearing about Billy Strayhorn, and I'm so glad I did, and especially from you, the great bright light that is our own Ty. So thank you for that. That was really inspirational. And yeah, so here we are in February. Our theme this year is about connecting, right? And the theme of the month, that's our year theme. The theme of the month is family. And so when I began to think about what I was going to talk about this week, I started keeping notes, and I ended up with pages and pages and pages of notes. I mean, there's so much to say about family and love and the spiritual path. And so many of us have had really complicated family experiences. I remember once, years and years and years ago, going out to lunch with somebody or something, and they said, we were talking about families, and they said, I don't know why everybody talks about families, because I've always just gotten along with my family, and my family's just wonderful and loving, and we've never had any problems, and they just have always supported me. And I thought, well, I guess statistically it's possible that there are those families out there that have no family issues whatsoever. And yet, I mean, I think many of us, maybe most of us, can relate more to the fact that families can be complicated, and that there are some family members we're closer to, not closer to. Some of us have had traumatic experiences within families, et cetera. It's a really, really big topic. And I was kind of getting in my head about this talk and how to talk about it. And, seriously, we could talk for hours about this. So what I decided to do is to just pick out the things that I felt from my heart were the most helpful for me and for all the people that over the years that I've counseled and worked with, regarding our spiritual walk in family. So please don't take this as a comprehensive fits all, but it really, I think these are high points, and they are right up in tune with what we teach here. So if you'll indulge me with that. So let's begin with the spiritual path. I mean, if you are listening to these words, you are on a conscious spiritual path. We're all on the spiritual path, but not everybody is conscious that they are. And centers like this are places where those of us who are conscious of being on the spiritual path, who want to walk in a spiritual way through the world, can come together, and we can learn, and we can experience, and we can grow together in doing that. And in our spiritual path, we always begin with oneness, not duality, one. That's what, if you go back and listen to the talks in January, that's what they were all about, living from a place of oneness, not duality, which causes us to walk through the world in a very specific way. Ernest Holmes says in The Science of Mind that oneness, the one, the creator, is love. He named it love. He said it's pure love. The essence of one is love. So if we are on the spiritual path, our call is to show up as love. So in other words, if we want to be the change, we need to be the love, and we need to present that in every situation. It causes us to not react, but rather to act as we move forward in the world. And when we do that, when we walk through the world in a spiritual way, with oneness as our compass, our guide, then what we're doing is we're walking through the world with the lens of love rather than the lens of fear or anger or any of those things. Our spiritual practice is that we are called to see love through situations, through the people in our life, to the love core that is beneath it. And A Course in Miracles, the spiritual textbook, A Course in Miracles says our main assignment in life is to show up as love in the place where it is often hardest to do so. And that is our family. It says in A Course in Miracles that our family is specifically designed for us to learn the maximum amount of how to love in the world. So here are a few ways that I've learned to navigate through family and at the same time try to walk my spiritual path, because otherwise we just have the same results that we always have had in our lives. If you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. But when we interrupt that pattern with love, spiritual love, then we get different results. So the first thing I would say is the first helpful thing for us as a spiritual being traversing through the path of what the Course in Miracles says is the most difficult assignment that we have, our family, is to create boundaries. That's the first and most important thing. At least it was for me, and I know it was for many people. Back in the 80s and 90s, when I really was focused on family and healing, I read a book called Codependent No More by Melody Beatty. And I learned that as an adult, I no longer had to adhere to the family history, the family rules, and the family role, R-O-L-E, role that I was assigned. I didn't have to not speak up because someone else told me I couldn't or shouldn't, or that it would hurt someone else. Codependent No More taught me that having boundaries, healthy boundaries for myself, actually was an act of love for myself. And it was an act of love to others in the family, because now they were seeing the real me and not just the role that I had always played in the family dynamic. And another book from the 80s or 90s that had the best title. I didn't read the book, by the way, but I loved the title so much, and it was enough because the title helped heal me. The book was called When Loving You is Hurting Me. I can't remember the author. I'm sure there's many books by that title now, but this was back in the 80s or 90s, When Loving You is Hurting Me. And what that title, and I thought about that many times over the years, it taught me that I was accepting things from my family that I wouldn't accept from anyone else. I wouldn't accept them from my friends. I certainly wouldn't accept them from coworkers. I wouldn't have even accepted them from the person at the other side of the McDonald's, checkout area. So why was I accepting it from my family? When loving you is hurting me, was blood really thicker than water? And what does that even mean anyway? So when I got on my spiritual path, I began to change. And I thought, as I'm changing and growing, I thought everyone in the family is just going to applaud. They're going to love it. They're going to think, wow, this is great, go. And that didn't really happen. It did with a few people, but it really didn't happen a lot. And that's because it upset the family dynamics, and that's not always welcomed. But what I learned is change anyway. Holding ourselves down to appease others isn't much of a life, and it certainly isn't what we're called to do here in our brief time on earth. Now, one more book, self-help book from the 80s and 90s that I really liked and helped me work through. You can tell I did a lot of work at that time, but it was a book that has a great title also. It's called It's Never Too Late to Have a Happy Childhood. Oh, and I just thought of another book, by the way. This is a side tangential thing, but there's a wonderful book called Legacy of the Heart, and the subtitle is The Spiritual Advantages of a Painful Childhood. That was also very helpful too. If you're working through family stuff, that's a good one to get, Legacy of the Heart. Anyway, there's a book called It's Never Too Late to Have a Happy Childhood. And that's important because our perception, well, our past, our childhood is what it is. The past is what it is, but our perception of our childhood can change. So years ago, for years, if you had asked me about my childhood, what I would have told you was probably mostly the things that caused me the greatest pain, my greatest wounds, the traumas. And Carolyn Mace writes in her books that people often bond over their wounds. She calls it woundology. And sometimes it can be healing to have relate to each other with a similar experience, but sometimes it can also be very limiting because what we do is we so identify with that pain and that it continues the pain. And it's from that pain that we begin to identify who we are as adults. And that limits us and that keeps us small. So when I was in my early 30s, I did therapy. And I was able, this was in the midst of me becoming a practitioner and a minister and all of that. And it was so helpful because I was able to move from seeing my past in one way to seeing it differently with more clarity. So instead of focusing on all the things that were painful, and there was a lot of pain, I was able to see the other things as well, the good parts, and there was a lot of good parts. And I saw the lessons that I had learned that made me who I am today. And eventually I was able to feel gratitude and love. So, if you've had a lot of family issues or severe trauma, get that kind of help because it helps us to move through it. As they say, the only way to it is through it. Also, when we think about love, spiritual path, family, I just want to put a shout out there to our chosen family because that was a really powerful path for me to experience. When you aren't accepted by some family members for who you are, for whatever reason, finding your own family of choice can be incredibly healing. This center, this community of people is a family of choice. And it's so healing and beautiful. I can still remember my very first time I ever walked into the doors of the center and hugs and people coming up and helpful. And, it's family of choice is important. I created over those years the family that I always wished I had. And I found that my chosen family was absolutely as much family as those I happened to be born in. I think a lot of you can probably relate to that as well. I did so much work in this area that I had this strong memory of when I got married over 20 years ago. Our first marriage, this is way before it was legal or anything like that. We had a big ceremony at the Ethical Culture Society in Brooklyn, where we lived at the time. And, clearly not everyone in my family was happy about the situation. So I didn't invite them. I looked at over the crowd when I was up there standing up front with the minister and Alan, and I looked at the crowd and I remember thinking, the only people who are here are people who love me and see me and accept me. And that was really powerful to know that I didn't have to do what you're supposed to do, which is invite everybody, even people who whatever, but I could just bring the people who love me. And many of those people were chosen family. This took a lot of inner work and spiritual practice. I didn't cut family out of my life, nor did I stop loving them. But I did raise the bar on what it took for them to be actively in my life. That's a spiritual practice. Some of you might remember Torch Song Trilogy, the great Broadway show, and then it became a movie. Harvey Fierstein. there's a scene in there. If you've seen it, you'll remember this. There's a scene in there near the end. He's gone through all of this stuff, and he has a very complicated relationship with his mother, who had rejected him because he was gay. And he was finally having an honest adult conversation with her. And it's a brilliant scene, brilliantly written. But there's a little portion that he says to her, and he says to her this. He kind of has, he's drawing the line in the sand, and he finally says this. He says, I have taught myself to sew, cook, fix the plumbing. I can even pat myself on the back when necessary, so I don't have to ask anyone for anything. There's nothing I need from anyone except love and respect. Anyone who can't give me those two things has no place in my life. Now, that was a beautiful moment, and I burst out crying, of course, in the theater, because I was like, wow, imagine what it would be like to be that person that could say that, and then I became that person. But then we want to go further. We don't want to just stop there, because that's not really the spiritual path either, to just say, okay, now you're, if you can't love and accept me, I'm putting you out there. That's important for me, and it's healing, but it's not the end of the story or the process, because we have to continue to love. If that's where it was, then we would all just be setting up walls against each other, and there's enough of that in the world. But we get to be actively loving to other people. So I've mentioned this once before, years ago, but it runs through my head all the time, at least once or twice a week for years. That line from that brilliant Stevie Wonder song. Ty could sing this song like nobody's business, by the way. It's that song, that girl thinks that she's so something, that song. Anyway, there's a line in that song that says, she doesn't use her love to make him weak. She uses love to keep him strong. All right, well, that's the next step. Because when we become healed, when we set our boundaries, when we do all the inner work that we need to do, now we get to step out in the world as this love. And that might mean also in our families. That's spiritual practice, not trying to change them. By the way, that's another lesson. Accept the people in your family as is. They've told you who they are by their actions, and accept that this is true for them. Accepting them for who they are isn't condoning them, but it is setting them free in your mind from the person you keep trying to get them to change into being. See them the way that you want to be seen and accepted. Maybe that's our practice back, to see them and accept them for who they are, flaws and all, good or bad, whatever. And then use that spiritual love that you have been developing in your spiritual practice to forgive them and to bless them. That's a process, but it's the way to true healing and to true love. So we get to help healing what needs to be healed. We get help healing what needs to be healed. Get whatever help you need. We do our own spiritual work by cleaning up our own stuff around family. And we love ourselves and we love them as is. And then we use our love to lift ourselves up, but also to lift them up as well, to all of my highest and greatest good and their highest and greatest good. Love, God, the one, sees our souls, sees the beauty beneath any pain and hurt that we have, the truth of who we are, and we are loved by spirit as is. But I remember the shock when I was writing this in my journal years ago, and I had the realization that if this was true, that spirit truly loves and sees us exactly who we are, and that everything is one, then that means, by the transitive property of geometry, that those who had hurt me the most were also loved and seen by spirit. That was a hard pill to swallow, I'm telling you, because in my unhealedness at that time, I wanted to be loved, but I wanted them to be punished. And who was being punished by that thought? Me. So that was a spiritual practice. If God created everyone from love, and that includes so and so who did such and such to me, then my spiritual calling wasn't only to get healing, but also to see through the lens of love to their core and love them as well. Oof, that's a tough one. Oneness, I'm telling you, this path of no duality, it is deep and it is rewarding, and it constantly calls us to live, to love more than we ever thought we could before. In closing, let me just say this. Ernest Holmes says in the glossary of The Science of Mind, when you look up the word love in the glossary, he says this, he says, love is free from condemnation, even as it is free from fear. This means that when we are in fear or judgment of others or ourselves, we are not in a place of love. Our spiritual practice is to transmute our thoughts from lead to gold. That's alchemy. From lead to gold, from lower to higher, from ego to spirit. Wallace Wattles, that great New Thought teacher of a century ago, he wrote that we cannot wait for a change of conditions before we do this. We do this and the conditions change. Don't wait for others to love you first. You, me, we, as our spiritual practice, as our gift to ourselves and the world, we be the love first, including in the area that A Course in Miracles says is our hardest, sometimes most challenging place, which is in our families. As we do this, we open up, we change family dynamics, we change family history, we allow people to see ourselves, and we in turn give that gift back to them. Let's take this as we move into prayer. Oh, I'm just moving into that place of oneness. It's always that place where I can breathe the most deepest, because I can let down everything and anything that is not of the one. What a gift to be able to return to this truth over and over again, and to begin to apply it in areas that I didn't even know I could. And that includes in my family. And right now, in this place of oneness, I just know and speak the truth for each one of us that we are each one with the one, open and receptive to all the spiritual truth that is ours. And we come together as one family in love, so that we might experience love greater, not just to receive it greater, but to then give it in greater and greater amounts to others, including and maybe especially to those that are hardest for us to love in our families. So we can think of a situation or a person in our families right now, something that is hard, that is challenging, a person maybe who doesn't see us clearly, or a place where there's a lack of love. Whatever it is, we see this right now, but we hold it differently. We see that person or that situation and we surrender right now with the love of the one. And we know that we're not separate from this person or this situation. We are together And right now, we just infuse it with an unconditional love, knowing that whatever is the truth for this person or this situation is not for me to say, it's for love to reveal. And we let that happen right here now. We just bring forth love in a place where it needs it more than ever before. And as we walk through our family dynamics, when we are around people who are family, when we have any kind of challenge or struggle, we remember that we don't have to react in the way that our family role might have dictated in the past. We can step out of that habitual thinking and choose to think higher, choose to think greater, and choose to think that we now are open to a miracle of love here. Because when we are in the one, this non-duality, this oneness, the truth, suddenly we are open to unlimited outcomes, miracles, or seeming miracles, because we are now open to spirit moving in a way that we don't have to control. We can just love. Oh, wow. What a great realization to know that our love could be such a powerful agent to bring light where there wasn't light before, and to bring truth and healing where it is most needed. And for that, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the opportunity that we get to be God's representatives on this planet. Love first. And we work on it right where we're at with the people who we are with right now. This is Valentine's Day. This is the time of love, and we shine forth like we have never shone forth before. We are bright lights. We are bright lights, and we shine even brighter than we ever have. And we envelop everyone in our lives. Those with us, and those around us, and those beyond us, into this spirit of love. And I put this forth out into love and law, knowing that it is true right here, right now. And together we say, and so it is.